Hello and welcome to the welcome to the Football League Weekly, a weekly show looking into everything happening in the EFL. And today we are very unfashionably late. I don't think we've ever been this late for a show before, so many apologies for that. But Rhys, we were watching the Ipswich game. It was quite a nervy game. I haven't actually written any notes on it, but what did you make of it?
Well, I thought first half, we were absolutely brilliant, to be honest. We got our sort of noses in front. Yes, okay, call it lucky. Personally, I think it's actually a fantastic finish because if Chaplin hits that cleanly, I think the keeper saves it quite comfortably. So I think the fact he actually hits it into the ground is the reason why it goes in. I know it's a bad mistake from the goalkeeper, and you can see the angle from behind the goal. It's a terrible mistake. You can't escape that. Well, just before we went live, I was saying after the 80th minute, I had to turn it off. I thought second half, we lost absolutely everything, didn't we? We couldn't hold it up. And it felt, I said to you during the game, it felt like another Cardiff. It felt like we were going to concede.
I agree, and it felt like it was going to be one of those games. And before we get into more detail on the game, a quick run through of what we're going to be talking about today. The Football League Weekly is, of course, a show looking into everything happening. We will, of course, be talking about the news in the Championship, League One and League Two, some of the Easter weekend action as well. And the first thing we'll start off after we talk about Ipswich, of course, will be the Premier League relegation race. I always call it a relegation race. As this year in the Premier League, it does seem like that. But we will be talking about the Premier League relegation zone. If you are watching live right now on Twitter or on YouTube, give us your thoughts on the relegation zone at the moment in the Premier League. Who do you think will be going down? Who do you think will be staying up as well? We would love to hear from you. And of course, if you are watching live on YouTube, hit subscribe and give the video a thumbs up. That will really do a lot for us. We would really appreciate it. But anyway, back to the Ipswich game. And I hate calling Ipswich lucky because I genuinely think we are where we are, top the table at the moment as we are speaking, for a reason. But am I bad in saying that today we had a little bit of luck against Blackburn?
To be honest, I think we absolutely fluked our way through that game, and it's the first time I've ever said it. But I don't think it was 100% with us, though. I think what felt like about 2 minutes into the game, it's as clear as a penalty as you're going to see. Broadhead goes up for a header, gets his shirt ripped off the back of him almost. So you can sort of excuse the offside goal if you want to. That offside goal, by the way, even though it was in our favour, if we're now regarding that as offside, it's ridiculous. If you look at the reaction of Hladky, the reaction of the centre-backs and our defenders, no one appeals it. No one thinks it's offside. And it just shows the sort of level of refereeing, to be honest, because at no point during the whole goal, during the whole finish, the assistant never raised his flag. So I don't see how you can consider that offside. But don't get me wrong, I'm thankful it was.
Yeah, we were celebrating, Ian. I mean, it's funny because I was talking about this earlier on with a Bournemouth supporting friend, and I said, because I assume we first started supporting the club at a very similar time, and the most successful period of the club, I assume, for both Rhys and I, was when we got into the playoffs and played against Norwich in 14-15. But this season, Rhys, does it feel a bit different?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, if we look back on sort of 14-15, we were under sort of Mick McCarthy, and at no point realistically did you actually sit back and go, "This is really good football." We never once said that back then. Let's be honest. So the fact we're actually going down to Portman Road now, you're watching on Sky, you're watching however people watch it, and the fact you're being entertained, we are probably the most entertaining team to watch in the EFL. So the sort of strides that we've made in terms of that season, it's night and day in so many reasons. You got off the field, the sort of developments with the training ground that hopefully will come to fruition, what's happening at the football stadium as well. The whole atmosphere feels different.
And good evening to everybody else in chat as well. Good evening to Ian. We are delighted to see you here. If you are watching over on Twitter, then I discovered this last week, but there is a live chat function over on Twitter. So if you want to get involved in the conversation, jump over to that. One final bit on today's game before we jump onto the Premier League relegation zone. Blackburn, despite the result for them, they really impressed me. What did you make of Blackburn's performance?
Yeah, I think we've got to give them their due, to be honest. Second half, especially from the sort of hour mark, they absolutely nullified us, and they kept us pinned into our own half of the field. And that's exactly, if you're going to play against us and get anything out of the game, that's the way you've got to do it. If you keep us pinned back, yes, okay, we took Kiefer Moore off, and that was probably the difference in the end. But they were fantastic. Schmodix, I thought, impressed me as well. There was no Sam Gallagher in the squad as well. A little bit disappointing not to see him have a run out, since he was linked to us, of course, in the summer. But I was really impressed. If they can keep that sort of standard up for the rest of the season, then it'll be a successful one.
Now, we said last week we were going to talk about it, but last week we didn't have enough time. But we are going to be talking about the relegation picture. I always call it the relegation race, but we are going to be talking about the relegation picture in the Premier League. Just a quick overview of what is happening at the moment in the Premier League, down at the bottom of the Premier League. Nottingham Forest's recent 4-point deduction for breaching Premier League profit and sustainability rules has pushed them into the relegation zone, just 1 point behind Luton Town. The relegation battle is tight with only 5 points separating Forest from the teams immediately above them: Luton, Everton and Brentford. Meanwhile, Burnley and Sheffield United find themselves 8 points adrift from safety. So I have a picture right here of the current bottom four, or the current bottom end of the Premier League. Am I fair to say, because we were going to be talking about this, that the gap between the Championship and the Premier League is bigger than it's ever been?
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. You look at last season and you look at how impressive Burnley were. We'll talk about them sort of being the next sort of big thing in terms of a club going to the Premier League, playing the right way. They had a really exciting manager in Vincent Kompany, who was really impressing as well. I think they made that jump up to the Premier League, which they're probably better than the Championship. Let's be honest. They were too so good to be in Championship. They were fantastic last year. But this season, it highlights perfectly the difference between the two divisions. That gap is simply too high. And I can't see a sort of solution to that. Because all you're going to get, realistically, for the next 3, 4, 5 seasons, is the 3 promotion sides will be the 3 relegated sides the following season. And it's just going to be a cycle and a cycle again. Because the problem is these parachute payments, there's too much money. Clubs that can go up, like ourselves, like Ipswich, we got absolutely no chance of competing up there. And it's created, on Twitter, now known as X, it's created a really, really good debate in the fact of, would you rather be Championship or Premier League? And for me, even though we sit here now top of the Championship, I'd much rather be Championship next season. I think
think I might have said this to you earlier on, that parachute payments is kind of like creating that gap between the Championship and the Premier League. And I think it's very difficult nowadays for these teams to compete as well, simply because of it. Would I rather be in the Championship or the Premier League? Well, my Luton Town sporting friend has told me that he is happy that they are in the Premier League and that he wouldn't mind if they got relegated. But personally, for me, if Ipswich were to get into the Premier League, I think being relegated with that money, with the parachute payments, would do them a lot of good as well. Just reading through some of the comments as well. Thank you very much to everybody who's joining us this evening. Sheffield and Burnley are definitely down. Luton Town have a fight about them. Sheffield United, and I feel harsh for saying this, but they're one of the worst teams I've ever seen in the Premier League. They're a case in point for kind of like what we're talking about in regards to the gap, aren't they?
Yeah, I think they're a prime example, to be honest. I'm not going to, I don't sit down and watch Premier League week in, week out. But the one game I watched about 3 or 4 weeks ago now was Sheffield United against Arsenal. Sheffield United being at home. And the difference in quality, look, I know they're up against one of the best teams in the league, but the difference in quality, and it's clear to see that they just couldn't compete. And the reason for that is off the field is these parachute payments. They're doing too much damage rather than doing anything good. You look at Norwich a few seasons ago, for what felt like an eternity, were just up, down, because it's so hard now to become sustainable in the Premier League. You look at, Burnley, Sheffield United, even Luton, absolutely fantastic last season. They really could deserve to go up, but haven't got a fighting chance of sustaining. Personally, I think Luton will go down this season. It'll be Luton, Burnley, and Sheffield United. But even by some miracle, maybe miracle is too harsh for a word, but if Luton do stay up, let's be honest, they'll be straight back down next season.
Yeah, and I agree, and it's a shame to see, really. Like Nottingham Forest, they've actually spent a lot of money. Like we talk about how, like the gap is unfair, especially financially. But if you look at it, Nottingham Forest, they've spent a lot of money and they've bought in some really, well, actually on paper, are really good players to fill in their squad as well. But, like poor managerial appointments has ultimately led them, and of course, point deductions has led them to where they are at the moment. And Sheffield United, of all due respect, I don't think Chris Wilder was really the right man to bring in. There is a case to be said that maybe they're a team he would go down regardless. But I genuinely think with Sheffield United that they should have kept their previous manager, because he wasn't doing a bad job at all. And Wilder, he's been in and out of jobs in the last couple of years. Middlesbrough, Watford, he's never actually managed to keep hold of any of them. So I don't see what more he could do to this Sheffield United squad, apart from the fact that he's got a tattoo of them on his thigh. That's probably all he could do, but I don't know what that would do. So yeah, it's a real shame to see kind of like the gap at the moment in the Premier League. And just reading through some more of the comments. Ian Bradley, Blades, Burnley, and sadly Luton will go down. Everton will do the great escape as they always do. Everton, they're a team who look as though in the next couple of years, if they don't sort their finances out, if they don't sort their ownership out, they could be in the Championship. What do you make of the Everton situation at the moment?
Yeah, they're definitely a team that have got to sort of wisen up a bit, to be honest. This season, look, they've got some tough games coming up. Don't get me wrong, their running is by no means easy. They're by no means safe. They have got that sort of security of having that game in hand on the teams around them as well. The thing is with Everton that they're always there or thereabout. They're another side who almost fall into the bracket of sustainability. They can't sustain in the Premier League in terms of doing it sort of comfortably, if you like. They're always struggling, and they're probably another sort of recipient, if that's the right way to put it, of this whole parachute payments and the whole money in the Premier League sort of going crazy, to be honest. Because let's be honest, we can sit here and we can predict the top 6 for the next X number of years. Nothing's going to change. But what you will find is that more and more teams, like your Evertons, like your Crystal Palace, maybe even sort of Fulham and Bournemouth, these sort of teams will then suddenly start to get left behind, and you're just creating a sort of mini league in the Premier League almost of your sort of top 6, top 8, and then everyone else in the league eventually are going to struggle.
And personally, I think the likes of the Saudis coming to Newcastle has done more damage to the Premier League than good. Because I can see the argument that the more money going into the Premier League, the better. Like it would be great to see Newcastle being like another European giant again. But I do think it's done more harm than it has done good, because it's destroying the foundations of English football. And a lot of the clubs who are traditional, who are, kind of like clubs who've been in the EFL for a long time in the Championship, they're ultimately being priced out of the Premier League. And the gap is dangerous, because I reckon that it will lead to basically more clubs going into bankruptcy, especially since a lot of these clubs like Newcastle, Man City and Manchester United are refusing to help these smaller clubs. Now, we spoke about it last week, and you can probably listen back to what we said about it last week, but a lot of these clubs turned down a bill to kind of like fund a lot of clubs in the EFL who are struggling financially. And I think, one, that is very wrong of them, and two, that's just a prime example of what we're talking about, where the gap is just going to get bigger and bigger. It's going to become more commercialized. Ultimately, like being in the Premier League might not necessarily be sustainable for a lot of these clubs. But one final question on this topic: which teams do you think have the best chance of avoiding relegation based on their remaining fixtures and recent form? So yeah, Rhys, what teams do you think have the best chance of staying up?
There we go. It helped us unmute.
You did a Ben. You did a Ben.
To be fair, I've had 6 mornings of getting up at 4:30 for work. I've still got 2 more to do, so my head's gone. Realistically, there's 3 spots to go down, isn't there? Of course there is, but 2 of those, Sheffield United and Burnley, may as well start preparing for Championship football. For me, they got sort of no hope of pulling off any sort of great escape. You look at Sheffield United, only on 14 points, realistically need to make up 8 or 9 before they even get level on points to even think about an escape. And they've got lots of a trip to Anfield coming up, Chelsea, Newcastle, Tottenham on the final day. Let's be honest, they're gone, aren't they? Same with Burnley, so got lots of Chelsea, Man United, Newcastle, Tottenham. They're gone, let's be honest. So it only really leaves sort of 18th place, that sort of one position left really to sort of fight for. And for me, it's out of 2 teams. It's out of Nottingham Forest and Luton. The reason why I say Luton to sort of go down ahead of Forest is because there is quality in that Forest side. There is, but it's all about, over the past couple of transfer windows, Forest have brought in so many players. They made the wrong decision with Steve Cooper as well. Getting rid of him, I thought, was madness, to be honest. It sort of goes to show that there is no sort of loyalty in the football. But I think Forest, they're going to be all right. The team I worry for most right now is actually Luton. The next 2 games, you can't get more difficult than Tottenham and Arsenal back to back, can you? So really, I think Luton are gone. They've still got like some Man City to face and West Ham. So realistically, it's going to be the 3 sides that came up last season are going to be the 3 sides that go back down again.
And thank you very much for all the questions tonight in chat. We will get to them at the end of the show. Good evening to Ballum. Good evening to David. Lovely to see you all here. We are now going to go on to the Championship. And we don't normally show goals on this show, do we? But we are, because we're not going to discuss results necessarily today. bar maybe a few. But I do want to talk about Jimmy Dunn's goal in QPR 2, Birmingham City 1. So I'm going to show you this goal, Rhys, and once I show it to you, give me your thoughts on it.
Well, what a strike this is. Jimmy Dunn wins the header and it just comes to the chest. Left foot volley dips over John Ruddy. What a strike. He wins the first header, Jimmy Dunn wins the first header, continues his run, picks up the second, chest, bang, yes! Well, what a way.
So first of all, that ball from Ruddy. I don't like Ruddy. He used to play for Norwich, but that was absolutely fantastic. But I'll read out, I can't even pronounce his name, the QPR manager's thoughts on the goal after this. But what did you make of it? It was absolutely brilliant, wasn't it?
The absolute nerve and the bottle you've got to have to try that in a game of that magnitude against Birmingham. You know it's a sort of must-win game. To sort of do that is incredible. But what I love more, we talk about football sort of moving on. It's all about tiki-taka. It's all about knocking it around the back. It's all about inviting teams onto you. This was, quote-unquote, proper football, wasn't it? It's a big hoof up. And within 3 or 4 passes, it's in the back of the net. Is it a goal of season contender? Probably not, to be honest. But it's absolutely audacious. It's ridiculous.
And Kifuentes, whose name I just pronounced perfectly, he was talking to Dan Evans after the game. He is a journalist, of course, and this is what he had to say on the goal. He deserves everything, talking about Jimmy Dunn. Players show character not only in the good moments, but also when things are not going their way. When he was not starting, he was always first in training, supporting his teammates. I'm very happy for him. He's a quality human being. Now, we don't show that much appreciation for some of the top players in these teams who are down at the bottom of the table. But Jimmy Dunn, how impressive a player is he, not only because of his characteristics that he's shown this season, but because of how he conducts himself off the field.
Yeah, I think he's an absolute role model. I think everything he does, the way he is in training, the way he's on the pitch, and I'm sure the way he's off the field as well. He's exactly what you want in your play. It's exactly what you need as well in the scenario that QPR sort of find themselves in. They're supposed to, we could be sitting here right now. I know it's a long way to go of the season, but that goal potentially could mean that QPR are playing championship football next season. That could be the goal that keeps them up. And to come from the man that's inspired you, that motivates you, who's such a big voice in that dressing room as well. We talk about so often when sort of clubs sort of sign older players or have these older players around the building, that it's not necessarily to play week in, week out, but it's more about having the voice in the dressing room to pick you up, to motivate you. And that's exactly what Jimmy Dunn is. He's been absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, I agree. And he's one of those players that you need in a relegation clash. A player who oozes coolness, a player who will lead the dressing room as well. Now, a game that I do quickly want to talk about before we do go on to some of the news in the Championship is Leicester's loss to Bristol. Now, we're not going to talk about what happened in the game per se. We're just going to talk about the game as a whole. Leicester, they've slipped up as of late. They've, of course, been handed a points deduction from the Premier League. They're still awaiting results for what will happen to them potentially in the EFL, whether they're going to be punished or not. But what I wanted to ask you was, do you think Leicester can still get automatic promotion, or do you think it looks like the current top 2 in the Championship are the most likely to get promoted?
Let's be honest, we were sat here back in January, February, debating whether or not this Leicester City side was the best the Championship had ever seen. And now we're sitting here sort of 6 to sort of 10 game weeks later, and we're saying potentially they might not make top 2. The sort of turnaround in form has been absolutely nothing short of insane, to be perfectly honest with you. And even the game against Bristol City, you would have put your mortgage on Jamie Vardy bagging both of those chances that he had. I was at work, so I didn't see the full game. But I saw two of the chances he had, one in over half. Look, it's a great save from Max O'Leary. Of course it is. But Jamie Vardy, one-on-one with the keeper, a player with that much experience, that much pedigree, scoring the goals that he does, you'd expect him every week to put that away. But I think that's quite a good sort of metaphor for where Leicester are, to be honest. They're low on confidence, they're slipping away, and they're letting these chances go. Yes, okay, they've got one of, if not the best squad in the league, but you still have to show respect in this league, and you still have to be fighting for every point. You'll still get punished if you don't sort of do things the right way as well. The Ipswich fan in me, of course, wants the top two to say how it is. Of course I do. But let's be honest, that Leicester side, at least on paper, is far too good for this league. They should still, okay, for me, they're not going to win the league now. Leeds will win the league. But Leicester should still be getting second place. And if they don't, it's nothing short of incredible. From where they were, 18 points clear at the top of the league, to now saying that they might not even make the top two, it's insane.
Now, I have a soft spot for Leicester because one of my favourite memories of football growing up, yes, that is how old all of you are, as I was probably about 15, 16 when they won the Premier League, I think. Might be wrong. One of my favourite memories, though, was them winning the Premier League and just following them that season. And it's a shame to see where they are at the moment because Vishai Shravathana Prabha, he was an absolutely brilliant owner for them. He loved the community. And again, he was just an all-round great guy. And to see where they are at the moment is sad. I know they're still doing quite well in the Championship. We're talking about them as though they're not doing well. But it's a shame to see, and I feel weird for saying this as an Ipswich Town fan, but I feel bad for them where they are at the moment. Now, if you breach these things, then of course you do need to be sanctioned, you do need to be punished. But I feel bad for the Leicester fans as well, because they've stuck with the club through thick and thin. And, you know, like, as an Ipswich fan, like, I've heard the likes of Leeds United and other teams around us give us the big one. But Leicester fans have always been very, very respectful. They've always been absolutely brilliant. So it is a real shame to see where they are at the moment. And Rhys, I wonder whether, because we were talking about the off-the-field issues last week, I'm wondering whether it is the off-the-field issues that are kind of distracting them at the moment. Is that fair to say, do you reckon?
Yeah, I think it definitely plays a part. I mean, it has to. But you're looking at your sort of players in that sort of starting 11 today, the likes of Dewsbury Hall. I can't remember anything he'd done today. I thought he was irrelevant in the game. Let's be honest. I mentioned before, Jamie Vardy was very, very poor today. So you're looking at his whole situation at Leicester, and it is remarkable to see sort of where they're falling, if you like, within the last couple of months. But all the outside noise, we could be looking at, if they get promotion, having to sell their better players to sort of balance the books as well. So the fact that realistically they have to get promoted is a must. But if you're going to put in performances like they did today against Bristol City, then you're not going to get top two. It's as easy as that. And let's be honest, if Leeds and ourselves get top two and they're still in the playoffs are a lottery. It then doesn't matter that you're 18 points clear at the top of the league. It doesn't matter that you finish third in the league. It's an absolute lottery. And then you look at their next game, Leicester, and they got Norwich at the King Power. And even then, it puts us town fans in such a sort of weird predicament going into that game as well. Because Norwich have been absolutely fantastic. And trust me, it pains me to say this, but especially at home, Norwich have been absolutely fantastic. And yes, okay, it's a game that 2 months ago you look at it on paper and you sort of think Leicester will have too much. There's no doubt about it. Leicester will sort of storm through. But now you're looking at Leicester running and you're sort of umming and ahhing now.
And it's funny because at the very beginning of the season, and if I recall, I remember us actually talking about this, Leicester are a rare team, and I'm probably going to butcher this when I try and put this down to words, if that makes any sense. But Leicester aren't a team who I can identify a discernible style of play towards, if that makes sense. Because, for example, with Burnley last season, Vincent Kompany had them playing very distinctive, stylistic football. Football that was easy on the eye, football that, again, like we can point and identify. But Leicester, early on in the season, they didn't necessarily have what Burnley had last season. They were a good team, but they were just winning games because they had the better players, because they had the Premier League players. And I'm wondering whether that is starting to show. Now, Maresca, he's a good manager, had a lot of success in Italy as well. But I'm wondering whether what I'm talking about in regards to the style of play is beginning to show as well. Because I was watching them earlier on and I didn't really spot anything too distinctive with their football. I see them as a team who, on their day, they can perform well because they have good players in the likes of Shrewsbury, Hall and Pereira. Don't forget Vardy as well, who can still play at the age of 35. But when they're not on the ball, when it's not their day, they really do struggle. But that is just my opinion. I'd be delighted to hear everybody else in chat give me their thoughts on Leicester City and what is going wrong for them at the moment. But now on to the news into the Championship. And we're going to start off today's news segment with something a little more negative. Some Stoke supporters, two, I think, have been banned for tragedy chanting. Two Stoke City supporters have been banned from all football grounds in Wales and England for 3 years following an incident of tragic chanting at Elland Road. I'm not going to read their names, but their names have been revealed to the public. They were found guilty of mocking the deaths of 2 Leeds United fans who lost their lives in Istanbul in 2000. They have both been fined £553 and they have to pay £85 in costs as well as £221 to the victims too. Now, the question that I wanted to ask about this, Rhys, because we never like talking about things like this on the show, how can football clubs and authorities prevent such disrespectful behaviour from fans in the future? And especially in regards to incidents like this.
First of all, it's absolutely horrendous what these Stoke fans what they were saying and what they were chanting, and it's awful that we're even sitting here now, sort of further away through 2024, and we're still talking about stupid incidents, sort of like this. But you're seeing it all the way through the pyramid now. Almost every week, there's a new video of someone mocking something that they shouldn't be, or giving abuse to someone. There's always something going on. Yes, there's a point of having sort of banter and friendly banter with the away fans. I do it myself at Portman Road. There's always a line, and you just don't cross that line. And the fact that they've only got around a £700, almost £800 fine, and they're banned from sort of football grounds for that length of time, for me, that's nowhere near harsh enough. You've caught these guys red-handed. Let's absolutely lay the law at them. Let's make a real example that we are going to sort of, as a football community, that we're going to stamp this sort of thing out. It's not enough just banning them from football grounds. They're still walking out on these streets doing whatever. Let's make a real example for, maybe even prison time. Let's really make an example now to really cut this out. Because until we do that, nothing's going to change, because all it feels like is a little slap on the wrist.
Yeah, and I agree. And an incident like this happened earlier on in the season with Sheffield Wednesday fans. And I think it's a tribalism of football as well, and simply drunken behaviour as well, because it's been absolutely years since England really had the reputation for being troublesome, because I was doing a dissertation on this for university actually, on like crowd behaviour in football, and like in the last couple of years the EFL have actually had a really good reputation. But I remember talking last year with David about incidents like this happening in League Two and League One, and it does seem to be on the rise in the EFL, especially when it comes to drunken behaviour. Now, I'm not encouraging the EFL to ban alcohol from stadiums, because if I'm wrong, correct me if I am wrong, by the way, but I think alcohol is now allowed in stadiums. Am I right in saying that, or isn't that
So
a thing anymore?
it's allowed in sort of concourses, but you can't take the alcohol to your seat. You have to have it sort of behind the bar.
Yeah. So I'm not a real drinker at football games anyway, but yeah, I assume that fans are just getting absolutely hammered like before games, because I know that whenever I do, because I live all the way in Cornwall, so I do try and go up to Ipswich every now and then. But whenever I do go up country, I normally go to the Greyhound for a couple of drinks. But you never really tend to see anymore a lot of fans getting absolutely plastered before games unless it's an away day. So again, it's an issue with the football culture, I think, in England. And again, it's difficult to stamp these out. But I think you were spot on in basically your assessment of it, and how they should really just lay down the law and lay down the rule book on, like those perpetrating these incidents, because we never like to see them. And again, I'll go back to what I just said. Last year, like when I first joined the Football League Weekly, I remember talking about this with David and such incidents. And it's a real shame to see that we're still talking about it now in 2024. It should not be happening. But on to more positive news. And with Birmingham City, we haven't really had a lot of positive news to talk about with them, have we? But Birmingham City are in talks to purchase land owned by the Birmingham City Council, and this is with the aim of constructing a new stadium in the eastern part of the city. So the council is in the final stages of selling the former Wills site on Bawdsley Park to an undisclosed bidder, as outlined in council documents. Now, a lot of mumble jumble legal talk right here, so I'm not going to read through all of that. But the potential deal could lead to the creation of up to 3,000 jobs through the development of the 48-acre site, located just over a mile from Birmingham City's town centre, or city centre, sorry, and less than a mile from St Andrews's Stadium. So a lot of the article that I was reading from just there was basically mumble jumble legal talk, as I just said, and basically the legal plans for the stadium as well. But from what I've just read out, Birmingham City could be getting a new stadium. Now, as I just alluded to, Birmingham haven't had a lot to really shout about this season, but how good a news is it that they could get a new stadium?
It is good news, and I do share that sort of same positivity. But for me, I'm never a fan of when sort of clubs move stadium. We've seen it so many times in the sort of Premier League, the likes of when Tottenham moved from White Hart Lane to Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, when West Ham moved from Upton Park to the Olympic Stadium. Look, this Birmingham sort of city move is very, from the impression we get from the article, is very in early stages, and the club themselves haven't even commented on it yet. So I wouldn't get sort of too ahead of ourselves here. The only thing I would say is I hope if they do move, that it still keeps the character. These new sort of these new modern grounds where it's just like a bowl. There's no sort of four actual stands. There's no divide between upper and lower. I just detest them. They look copy and paste. You're too far away from the sort of pitch itself, which is why I love, maybe controversially, and perhaps it's a good idea for the chat to sort of put down, excluding your own club, but your favourite stadium that you sing, your favourite sort of stadium in the EFL outside your club. Because for me, it's QPR. I absolutely love Loftus Road. It's a proper old-fashioned ground. You're right on the edge of the sort of pitch, and you really create that atmosphere. Whereas now it seems to be that every club is going for this sort of bowl, and you're a million miles away, and you need binoculars to see the other end of the pitch. So for me, this all depends on, let's see the stadium plans first. Let's wait for Birmingham to actually officially comment on this, and then we go from there.
Yeah, because the worst ground I've ever been to, and I feel bad for saying this because my grandparents are supporters of this club, but Reading, the Medeski Stadium, is a stadium I absolutely hate to go to on an away day because there's no atmosphere. And I don't think it's the Reading fans. I think it's the stadium itself, a classic goldfish. And I'm calling it classic, but we see a lot of goldfish bowl stadiums now. Stadiums that were built in the mid 2000s that have absolutely no personality at all. Now, I'm going to put you on the spot, Rhys, and everybody else in the chat, but what is the worst stadium you've ever been to?
Now, you said the Majeski, so I won't go there and just take the sort of cop-out answer. If I go for the whole sort of experience of the day, when you're talking about sort of staff and the whole sort of welcome of the ground and how you're treated, ignore this shirt, it's Carrow Road. I went there and it felt like the ground was stuck sort of 20 years ago. It's, okay, they have the best of seats. You're sort of up away in the sort of top-hand corner. There was a picture going on Twitter the other month where the drummer at Norwich is behind the sort of pole, so the drummer can't see the game, and it's a really weird stadium, to be honest. So if I had to say one, it would be Carrow Road, but it's not just because I got an Ipswich shirt on.
I always appreciate stadiums though, like Carrow Road and Home Park. Because I've actually been to both those stadiums as a home fan. I went to Norwich with my friend. I was actually wearing an Ipswich shirt underneath my jumper, but nobody noticed, luckily. Or would have been battered if they did. But having been to both those stadiums as home fans, the home ends are always really fun to be in. Close to the pitch, good atmosphere, close to the other fans, but the away ends, and I think Home Park is a brilliant example of this. The away ends are the worst to be in. Now, Home Park is the worst away end I've ever been to, just because you're on a really awkward side of the stadium where you're looking at the pitch kind of like lengthways, so you can't really see what's happening on the pitch. You can't see what action is going on. It's an absolutely miserable experience. You're only there because it's an away day, really. Now, Ian Bradley, he says the worst stadium for me is Harrogate, but they all have their redeeming features. I haven't been to many League Two stadiums, actually, so I need to try and attend a few because I do like League Two football. If you are in chat at the moment, then give us your worst football ground you've been to, and we will, of course, read them out at the end of the show. But we did go off topic there, so back onto what we are going to be talking about now. On to League One. I have quite a few games that I wanted to talk about, but in League One this week, there's actually quite a lot of news. I'm going to give you an option, Rhys. Should we talk about the games that have happened in League One this week, or should we talk about the news in League One?
Let's do the news, shall we? If that's cool with the chat, let's do news.
And of course, if we've missed your team, then ask us to read out the result or discuss the result, should I say, at the end of the show. And we will, of course, do it in plenty of detail. But we are going to be reading the news this week in League One. And Liam Scully has been banned from Lincoln's ground. Lincoln City's chief executive, Liam Scully, faced consequences for his conduct during the team's 5-0 League One victory over Bristol Rovers on the 16th of March. Now, Ian Bradley just said that they're flying in chat, and they are indeed flying, but they are without their chief executive at the moment. Because following the match, Scully was found guilty of displaying improper and threatening behaviour towards a match official in the tunnel area, resulting in a 1-game ban from Sisselbank and a £2,000 fine imposed by an independent regulatory commission. Now, despite admitting to inappropriate behaviour towards the official, Scully has actually denied the allegations of being threatening. The incident occurred after Lincoln City's defender, Ian Echeron, whose name I've just butchered again, after he was dismissed from the pitch, marking the 10th red card issued by the match referee this season. And of course, the charge means Scully will miss. Well, he missed today's game against Leyton Orient. Now, it's difficult to really formulate a question for this because this is just something that happened, if that makes sense, and something that we don't like to see. But Rhys, give me your thoughts on Liam Scully being banned from the ground, because I always think it's very embarrassing when we see authorities from clubs, club figures who aren't players being banned because of behaviour. So give me your thoughts on this.
It's a really strange one because he's still sort of denying it, but the club themselves actually come out and sort of banned him as well. So it does make you sort of questioning your sort of mind. Had he said something sort of privately and admitted it privately, but for obvious reasons doesn't want it to be public, which that we'll never, well, I say we'll never know, but we'll probably never sort of know the extent to that as well. And it sort of shines a bad light on the club as a whole because Lincoln themselves, they're into the sort of playoffs for the first time this season. The club are doing absolutely fantastic. Now, when I say that, I'm not defending the actions at all. Match officials should not ever be threatened for doing their job. At the end, the refereeing in the EFL as a whole, without sounding too much like Steve Evans from Stevenage, the whole sort of standard of officiating is absolutely, it's appalling at the moment. It's absolutely ridiculous. So it's not a surprise to me to start seeing sort of confrontations happening because I've always said if they can referee a game where you let the advantages sort of play out and you're trying to sort of let the game flow, then that's good in my eyes. But when you're stopping a game every sort of 3 or 4 seconds for little petty fouls, then frustration does build. Of course it does. But the officiating as a whole, across the whole 3 divisions, if not the whole country, it is at a low.
Now, talking about bans and people being banned from stadiums, Steve, I'm laughing because you just mentioned Steve Evans, and that was the absolutely perfect segue for what we're going to be talking about. Stevenage manager Steve Evans has been handed a 2-match extended touchline ban for breaching the terms of a previous ban during his side's 3-1 defeat against Peterborough United. So I'll go into more detail on the ban in a minute, but good old Steve Evans, I love him. What do you make of his ban? Because I can't believe he breached it. What a stupid thing to do.
It's absolutely ridiculous, really. When you know you're not meant to do something, why on earth would you go against it and put yourself into more trouble and shine that sort of bad light on the club again when the club's doing really, really well, pushing for that top 6? Why would you try to do something that sort of takes the light away from that as well? But Steve Evans as a character, I absolutely love the bloke. I really do. His sort of post-match celebrations when he's doing the fist pumps and he's with the crowd and you can see the sort of synergy that the fans absolutely adore him as well. He is just an absolute character. And that's exactly what football needs. Football needs characters. We're seeing too many sort of, I don't say the word dull, but dull managers sort of come in. We're sort of losing character in football. Even players, we're not seeing sort of characters anymore, are we? The whole football seems taking a sort of step back. So to see someone with character is absolutely, it's fantastic. But he's a sort of manager that you'd love to have when you're doing well. But on the opposition side, he's a manager you absolutely detest. Because it does feel like every post-match interview the man does, he blames the officials for something. So the only criticism of him is that he just needs to sort of take responsibility himself as well and just admit to things.
And I'm going to go into more detail actually about why he got the ban. Maybe I should have read it before just for the context, but the original ban stemmed from yellow cards received by Evans and must still be served according to the Football Association. He will first serve the extended ban during the upcoming bank holiday games, so the game that happened today against Bolton Wanderers. That finished 0-0, by the way. And, of course, the rest of the Easter games as well. So How do you think this will affect Stevenage? Because Stevenage, in my opinion, they're still in the playoff picture in League One, but this isn't the best time for your manager to be banned from the touchline, is it?
When you're in these scenarios and you're really pushing for that sixth spot, you need uni. And it's the word I've used throughout the last few shows. You need your team to be united. You need to have that sort of push as a whole, as a team. And the fact you're losing your manager for something so stupid, like not adhering to a ban that you've already had in place, it's just ridiculous, to be honest, though. Same thing as, yes, okay, he's not on the touchline. I don't know how sort of in and outs of the bans work, but even using the dressing room, so that's still something. So why on earth you'd go against a ban? You're getting a fine unnecessarily as well, when the team's doing as well as they are. To me, you're not really thinking about anything, are you? You're just all making it about you again. Whereas Delight should be on the team because they're in a real push, along with Oxford and Lincoln, to make that sixth spot.
Yeah, and again, I just think that football teams should really just be, or football teams, I mean, football managers should just really be conducting themselves better. Because I remember, God, what year was Steve Evans Leeds United manager? Might have been in the 14-15 season, 15-16. But I remember him absolutely having a pop at Luke Chambers after the game. And I remember going, what if things get out of hand here? What if, there is confrontation, etc.? So, I do like Steve Evans. We can swear on the show as we're an hour in, but I reckon he is a classic shit house manager. And I like seeing these personalities, but they still need to conduct themselves professionally and, as well as any other manager should, really. So on to some other news, and brilliant news for Reading. Reading Football Club have entered exclusive negotiations with a potential buyer following De Jong's commitment to a letter of intent. The negotiations will focus on finalising the terms of a sale, including Dye's shareholding in the club, the stadium, and surprising news because Wickham actually pulled out of their potential plans and buying their training ground, Bearwood Park, as well. So the bad news is, I guess, Rhys, is that this could potentially take 2 months to go through. But how good a news is this for Reading, providing that these are actually genuine buyers who will give the club a lot of money? But how good a news is this for Reading that they could potentially be keeping their training ground as well, and of course be getting new owners too?
This is exactly what Reading fans and really football fans as a whole, this is exactly what I've been waiting for. There is now a very small light at the end of a massive, massive tunnel. You look at De Jong's sort of reign of Reading and it's been nothing short of a mess. It's been ridiculous. It's been points deductions, transfer embargoes, missed HMRC appointments, the cost cut when players were having microwavable pre-match meals. And for all that time, there wasn't one public interview. It's just been an absolute mess. We had the sort of negotiations that turned out to be nothing about Bearwood as well. We had the uproar with that. We mentioned it last week about it being morally wrong. And you look at all this and it's just ridiculous. But thankfully, there is now a light at the end of the tunnel. Reading should, quote unquote, they should be safe this season now. The only sort of caveat is that it's going to take 2 months, but at least they're going to get the summer to properly sort of rebuild, or at least try to rebuild, which is exactly what they need to do.
So the fan-led protest group Sell Before We Die, they continue to raise awareness about the ownership issues of the football club. How significant is fan activism in influencing club ownership decisions, and what role should supporters play in shaping the future of their football clubs?
There needs to be more sort of fan-led interaction in clubs and into decisions and how things work. At the end of the day, fans are the ones that keep the club alive. At the end of the day, fans are the ones putting hard-earned money into the club. we pay extortionate amounts to travel around the country to go follow the team as well. Which is why it really winds me up, when we touched on it last week, where you have managers or you have owners or you have CEOs or whoever it may be coming out and condemning protest groups like Sell Before We Die. Because at the end of the day, these groups are the only reason why it gets public and national news. Like the England game last week, when it had the vans outside, the big message on as well. That's how you attract the media. That's how things that's how things change, and that's how you get the positive outcome at the end. Because let's imagine that Sell Before We Die never existed, right? They were never a thing. Would we be sat here now saying they're on the verge of new ownership? We probably wouldn't. Let's not underestimate the sort of power that fans can have, the pressure they can put on, all the protests that have been organised, from the tennis balls to getting games abandoned. All of this is all put pressure on Dai Young. And thankfully now, if it all goes through, fingers crossed, Reading fans have a reason to be excited again.
Yeah, and I do agree with your sentiment that these fan groups are important, because was it the Wickham owner the other day who came out and basically criticised Sell Before You Die? I think it was. And sorry if you can hear background noise, by the way, but I think that these fan groups should be encouraged, because, you know, like we had it at Ipswich when Marcus Evans was on his way out of a football club. These things can, of course, like go too far, and that's an obvious thing to say. But at the end of the day, I genuinely think fans have to take it too far to kind of like make action happen. And look, I'm not encouraging anything, don't clip that, but, you know, like when Ipswich Town fans lit flares outside the training ground during Marcus Evans's final couple of months, should I say, at the club, or when Reading fans stormed the pitch. Now, you know, like these things are examples of going too far, but I genuinely think that these things are important, as, you know, like changes and attention probably wouldn't have been drawn to these things had they have not done anything. But I'm not encouraging violence. I'm not encouraging anything like that. That's just my opinions on what is happening at the moment. And we are now going to go on to League Two. If you are watching over on Twitter or on YouTube, then of course get involved in the chat, ask us some questions for the end of the show. A quick shout out to Ian Bradley's Match Day vlogs as well. He has produced some absolutely brilliant content that you can find over on our YouTube. His next 3 over the bar vlogs are Derby v Leyton Orient on April the 13th, Lincoln v Portsmouth on the 27th of April, and the National League promotion final on the 5th of May. That will be absolutely brilliant. So they are absolutely brilliant vlogs. I personally really enjoy them. They are well worth your time. Go check them out. Give them a thumbs up on YouTube. And of course, share them with your friends as well. We're now going to go on to League Two. And again, the format again on the Football League Weekly has changed. We're not going to be talking about, again, games as much as we are going to be talking about news, just so the show stays fresh and so people can listen to it maybe a week after as well. But I do want to talk about Colchester, because Colchester are a team who do deserve a bit more attention. We were talking about last week about the issues that they had with their football pitch, and they actually had something to cheer about today in a crucial fixture against Newport County. Colchester United secured a potentially vital win in their battle against relegation from League Two. Ofrande Zanzala, who of course used to play for Salford City, he capitalised on a defensive error before half-time to give Colchester the lead. Newport County did, of course, pull one back on the 75th minute, but Jave Mingy, he scored a late winner to give Colchester the win. So despite the win, Colchester's position remains precarious, with 3 games in hand on Sutton United, who trail them by just 1 point. So Rhys, how crucial is Jay Mingy's late winner for Colchester United in their battle against relegation? And what does this say about their resilience in crucial moments?
Yeah, I think this was a lot better from Colchester without getting massively carried away, without saying that they're suddenly going to make mid-table. I think this is a lot better. They opened the scoring, they got pegged back, they're showing character, they're showing resilience, and they've got their reward. Yes, okay, they can sort of fall back on the fact that they've got games in hand, but they mean absolutely nothing. They've got a really busy April, Colchester. It's an insane month. They've got lots of Stockport and Wrexham. So the fact that they're getting the sort of 3 points now is absolutely vital. Let's be honest, it's a massive win. I'm not saying, look, I'm not saying the Cowley brothers are only going to go in there. They're going to win their remaining sort of 8 games and they're going to storm it. I'm not saying that by any stretch of the imagination. I think Colchester as a whole probably need 2, 3, 4 transfer windows to really sort of push themselves up, to be honest with you. But this season is all about survival. All it is, it's making sure they're playing League 2 football next season. And I'm almost confident in saying that they will. The only thing that sort of sticks in my mind when it comes to Colchester is the vast amount of games they've got, the short turnovers between games. And we saw last week, the state of that pitch was horrendous. So there's also a question mark on those rearranged home games as to whether or not they'll get played, whether they'll get moved to a different location, and that provides question marks. But realistically, if you can get 3 points, that they have done, they all count. Yes, it's a very late goal. Fair enough, but that shows character. That's exactly what you need when you're down. When you're down in a relegation fight, you need to have that character, and they've got it.
And I was watching their game on Sky Sports against Mansfield, I think it was last weekend, and Owen Goodman, who is on loan from Crystal Palace, he is Colchester's goalkeeper. He had an absolutely brilliant game. He looked like a hell of a player. And in that game, Colchester looked really promising. They looked as though they had a lot of fight about them. They looked as though they had a lot of personality. Cameron McGeehan, who used to play for Luton, he put on a brilliant display, in my opinion. They are a team with personality and decent players, and they have a team with a lot of experience as well, like Cameron McGeehan, he used to play for Luton Town. Jay Mingy, he had a couple of games at Portsmouth, he did quite well there. So they have got quality, and I reckon Danny Cowley is making the most of what they have at the moment. Now, they're not a perfect squad. They're a squad that is very unbalanced with a bunch of youth players and old heads as well. But I do reckon that Danny Cowley is the manager to potentially get them out of the predicament, because, again, they are in a really bad predicament at the moment that they are currently in. Now, a question in chat from Ballum. Colchester or Sutton going down, do you think? And Alan Judge went to Woking in the league below, some signing for them. So Colchester or Sutton, who do you think is going down?
That's a question and a half. So I'll start with the Alan Judge while I ponder and absolutely think my way through this and just stall as much as I can. And absolutely fantastic. That's an incredible sign. It really is. But when you're as late on in your career as he is, after a long-term injury or two now, is he really going to be able to shine? I hope he does, but probably not. For me, this risk comes down. I want to be positive. Colchester is only down the road from where I am. I want to be really positive. I want to say they'll stay up. I really do. But I don't think they will. I think Colchester will go down. I think that busy month is just going to be too much. You've got to rearrange home games in there. You've got to fit those in. You've got to get your rest between as well. There's no doubt, look, there's quality in that squad. There is. But this team needs a right overhaul as well. I mean, you look at their bench for today's game. It's a really strong bench. Like to Chilvers, Hornby, Hopper on the bench as well. It's a decent squad. It is. But I just think that April, it's too much for any team to have 8 games in 1 month. It's too much for any team. But when you're a team that's struggling as much as they are, they've had their off-the-field issues that they have as well. I think it's too much.
Yeah, and I agree, and it will be a real shame to see them go down because Ian Bradley asks whether it is Cole, you, or ITFC Old Boys these days. Now, I remember last season when they were literally ITFC Old Boys, they had the likes of Emir Hughes, Freddie Sears, Cole Scoose, Luke Chambers, who, if I remember, actually did quite well there. They had a bunch of old Ipswich players. Ipswich, I don't want to say rejects because Luke Chambers, in my books anyway, is an ITFC icon, maybe not a legend, maybe an icon given the service he did for the club. But I reckon that they're going through a transition because they've let go of all of those players. Alan Judge as well. Give them credit. They let Alan Judge stay at the club for rehabilitation. But they've let go of all of those players. And in our season preview, we were talking about how a lot of their players are either young players made by the club or young players on loan from other clubs. And I think Danny Cowley's done a very good job by balancing them with, and I know I just said that they're really unbalanced, but he's trying his best by actually trying to balance them on the pitch. Cameron McGeehan, who was brought in January, he is a very experienced player who's been promoted to the Championship with Luton. He's a player who could be absolutely vital for them. And I think some of the signings that he's made could potentially be their saving grace, because they are going through a transitional period. And I think my problem with that transitional period is that it's come at a time where they can't really afford to have a transitional period. Because if anything, and this is a controversial opinion, Rhys, so I'd love to hear your thoughts about it at the end. I don't think they should have let go of all of those ITFC old heads that Ian is talking about, because I think they would have been important anyway. I think they would have provided vital experience, even if they weren't playing week in or week out. So, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think they should have let go of the likes of Emir Hughes, Alan Judge, Luke Chambers, Cole Scoose, Freddie Sears as well? Or do you think they made the right choice?
You can't get rid of that vast amount of experience and expect results to sort of still be there and expect tempo to be there. We talked about it earlier when we were referring to sort of Jimmy Dunn and the sort of off the pitch, the way you conduct yourself. Sorry, I've just been distracted because Watford taking the lead against Leeds. Watford are 2-1 up, which seems that just caught my eye. That's
impartial.
Yeah, so when you let go of that fast experience, you don't have those voices in the dressing room anymore. You don't have that sort of insight. You don't have that how you sort of act as well. So you lose a lot. And you see it a lot during football as well. When you lose experience, teams do get relegated. It happens. You have to bounce back and you have to rebuild. And now you can't now. And you look at their sort of games, they got like sort of Wrexham, Stockport, Crawley. That's 3 games in a bounce where realistically, I can't see them picking up any points. Last game of the season's against Crewe. So that's 4 games out of the last 8 where realistically, I can't see them picking any points up at all. So where are these points going to come from? Where they're going to stay up? Because Saturday United aren't going down quietly. Forest Green, okay, lost 3-0 to Stockport today. They won't go home. They won't go down quietly either. So I don't see where the point's going to come from.
And it's funny because I believe unless you are at a club, you don't really know what teams are going through, and you don't really know like the opinions of opposition fans. So I guarantee that if you asked a Colchester United fan if there are any in chat, then give us your thoughts on what is happening at your club. I guaranteed if you asked any of them, then they'll say, no, we did the right thing by letting go of these players. Their legs were starting to show. They were either always injured or not performing well. So it is a fascinating debate to be had. But we've been going on for quite a while tonight, so we better hurry up with the news. And luckily, there isn't too much to talk about in regards to news in League One. But we did want to talk about, and I'm going to get my notes up here because last week we didn't have time to talk about Accrington Stanley. It was one of the bits that we had to cut at the very end of the show. So real quickly, whilst I get my notes up, John Coleman has recently come out and he made a very controversial statement. Andy Holt, sorry, I got the names wrong there. Andy Holt came out. He is the Accrington Stanley chairman. He came out and made a very controversial opinion about former manager John Coleman. So Accrington Stanley chairman Andy Holt has admitted to feeling too loyal to the former manager John Coleman, regretting not parting ways with him sooner. Coleman and assistant Jimmy Bell were dismissed earlier this month, with the club positioned 16th in the league table. Holt has been controversial lately, to say the least, with his statements on social media and his lashing out towards fans, revealed that he contemplated sacking them even before back in League One last season, believing it might have salvaged their top flight status. So I'll go into the news story in a bit more detail in a minute, but Andy Holt, my opinion on him has kind of gone 360, because last season or a couple of seasons ago, and I've spoken about how during away days it was like really like hospitable before or like towards fans. John Coleman, or not John Coleman, my brain's gone, I'm tired, sorry about that. But Andy Holt, he's kind of like made a bit of a muppet of himself recently, because he's come out and lashed out against fans on social media. He's been really unprofessional. Now you can look back at last week's show, because we did briefly talk about it, I think, or maybe the show the week before. But what do you make, before I talk myself into a ditch because I'm tired, talk about Andy Holt and the way he's been conducting himself and what he said about John Coleman?
It's one where it just shows respect, don't it? The guy himself, I think he's a really genuine guy. There's no doubt behind the actions. He cares for the club. He wants to put the club first. I don't think anyone can doubt here. I just want to sit here and doubt that by any means of the imagination. He's definitely got the sort of club interests first. But the whole appointment of sort of John Doolan, I just don't understand it. In that sort of long-winded statement, Andy Holt talked about wanting to put the club into a new direction, wanting something different, something fresh, an avenue they haven't explored before. But then they appoint John Doolan, who was part of the backroom staff when Stanley won the league title in 2018. So he isn't actually a breath of fresh air, because he's worked with the club before. Yes, okay, he had time away. He worked for likes of Liverpool and Everton academies, so he's built up his experience through those avenues. But I don't see this as a new as a breath of fresh air. I think it's almost another safe option, to be honest. Then you look at his 2 games once he was officially appointed first team manager. It's been 2 losses. And it's 2 losses against teams that, okay, Morecambe is a very tough game. I'm not discrediting that. But loss against Sutton, for a team that want to establish as League 2 and push up the pyramid, which is what Andy Holt is actually wanting this team to become, when you lose against Sutton, it does raise questions. I'm not saying by any stretch that John Doolan is a sort of bad manager or bad. I'm not saying that at all. What I don't see how this is an exciting appointment. I don't see it as one that makes me go, oh, okay, this is what they needed. It just doesn't excite me. It doesn't get me off my chair and makes me go, oh, okay, this is a real intense sort of business. It doesn't.
Yeah, so the thing that I was going to talk about that we didn't have time to talk about last week was John Doolan's appointment to first team manager. And basically, yeah, you summed up what I was going to say perfectly in regards to his appointment. But on to the rest of the statement right here. In an interview with BBC Radio Lancashire, Holt elaborated on the club's decline under Cole's leadership, citing the introduction of an under-23s team as a fatal error that strained resources and led to internal conflicts. Despite the initial success, Such decisions ultimately contributed to the team's relegation from League One, with Holt acknowledging that his own inaction in addressing these issues earlier on led to the club going down to League Two. And the final straw came when assistant manager Jimmy Bell publicly highlighted delays in contract negotiations, leading to a breakdown in trust between the management and ownership, and ultimately leading Andy Holt to have a midlife crisis, I assume. So, yeah, I ad-libbed the last bit right there. But I think Andy Holt coming out and basically saying all of this does more harm to Accrington Stanley than it does good. Now, again, I've spoken about it a lot in the past, so you could probably go back to see my proper thoughts on this. But I think Andy Holt is the type of person that just kind of like needs to sell up the club. Now, somebody said, oh, is he ever going to come onto the show? He'd be a very interesting person to talk to. But I think he's at the point now, and I'm just reading between the lines, where he doesn't really want to be involved in football anymore. And League Two is a very straining league, especially financially. And I think he's been tested financially as well. Now, first of all, him coming out and basically having a pop at the under-23s team, that was his own decision right there. He made the decision to get an under-23s team. I don't know why he's having a go at John Coleman for all of that. That is absolutely outrageous in my opinion. He really should take more responsibility for where they are now. Now, I know some will say that he is taking responsibility by saying, look, I should have sacked Coleman earlier on. But if anything, and I don't know what you think, Rhys, I think that's throwing John Coleman under the bus. A club legend under the bus. A legend who, if it wasn't for him, you know, like who knows where the club would have been? Like the club could still be in the National League if it wasn't for John Coleman. So I think him coming out and essentially throwing him and Jimmy Bell under the bus is absolutely disgraceful, really. But that is just my opinion. But that was just my mini rant about Andy Holt, because I do think he's been conducting himself maybe not in the right manner in recent years on social media. And I think social media is an absolutely wonderful thing, but you say a lot of things that you wouldn't necessarily say in person on social media because you are sat behind the keyboard. Now, I'm not calling Andy Holt a keyboard warrior by saying this. I'm just saying that he should really stay off social media. But a little rant right there, Rhys. Yeah, do you agree with my sentiments right there about Andy Holt, or do you disagree? Yeah, basically, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Let's say it straight. If John Coleman and Jimmy Bell didn't do their fantastic work, Accrington wouldn't be in the EFL. I think it's as simple as that. And when Holt comes out and throws him under the bus, it is simply to get the sort of attention and the blame away from him. And he's trying to look like the innocent party here. Whereas the fact is, taking a shot at the club's under-23s, and it's just ridiculous. You know, why would you invest in something that you know isn't sustainable? That is the best way as well, because obviously the transfer market has gone absolutely mad in recent times as well. If you can develop players in-house as well, that's a really useful asset, especially to have in League Two as well. Because if you can establish yourself and invest in your youth system, that's a really smart way around competing with teams higher up. I'm not going to say that to Wrexham, because I think the money that Wrexham have spent when it came out on the sort of annual accounts has been insane for this level. But have a pop at that and try to throw club legends under the bus, it's a ridiculous thing to say. It really is.
Yeah, Ballon Benny Boy, Andy Holt come outside. Yeah, Andy Holt might never come onto the show. Yeah, he probably won't after hearing all of this. But another comment that made me chuckle right here. Can we play Accrington's milk advert? I'm really tempted. Rhys, what do you think? I'm really tempted to pull that advert off YouTube and play it on the show. Should we carry on talking about Accrington for a bit longer and then play it?
I think that should be the new outro, you know.
Hey, that's going to be the outro for today's show. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to play that as the outro, then do all the plugs and finish the show. So thank you for the suggestion right there, Ballum. But my final thoughts on this, and I'm going to basically be improvising whilst I get what we need off YouTube. It was his own decision basically to get an under 23s team, and I think it's absolutely ridiculous for him basically to play the victim right here, because the owner, I don't know whether he's trying to play savior right here, whether he's basically trying to justify everything that he's done for the club and basically his recent actions in the last couple of weeks. And I think it's wrong for him to do so, because Andy Holt, you were the one who basically made the under 23s team. You can't backtrack on your decision and say, oh, it was financially taxing, when you were the guy who implemented it. Teams in League One and League Two, they've gotten by not having an under 23s team. I know that Brentford, for example, they're in the Premier League. They have a B team. They don't have an under 23s team. They don't really have a youth academy. They have a B team, which I know for a fact, and I can say this in confidence, isn't as financially taxing. So, like, it's a real kind of like difficult thing to read into. And I don't get Andy Holt's kind of like decisions to come out so publicly and basically have a temper tantrum. Now, one final thing before we do move on to the questions at the end of the show. Andy Holt Rhys, we've spoken about him for quite a while. Should he sell up? And when do you think he should sell up?
Yeah, I think it's time now. I think it'll come to the end of his sort of tether now. Things are really starting to sort of fall apart, and the best thing to do while you're on some sort of high still, if you like, is to try to sell while you can. There's a famous saying, isn't there? You either sort of you leave a hero, or you stay long enough to become the villain. And at the end of the day, he's sort of teetering on that sort of edge now. And he's getting very, very close. But the problem is, and we were discussing it a few weeks ago, talk about Reading as well, you've got to find people to buy. It's not as easy as just go, right, okay, clubs for sale. There's so many checks that go on from Andy Holt as well. Look, there could be a new ownership come into Accrington, or a new owner come into the club, and it could really take the club backwards. There's no guarantee that a new owner comes into the club and things are rosy and fantastic. So there's no guarantees in football. That's the only thing I would say to it. And sometimes it is better the devil that you know, rather than someone else come in.
Yeah, and I think that is absolutely spot on right there. Now, we are going to go on to the questions. If you want to put one in chat, then it's not too late to do so. We've been going on for a while tonight, an hour and a half of brilliant football talk. I've really enjoyed it. So thank you very much to everybody who's joined us here tonight. Sorry for the silence right here. I'm just reading through some of the comments. Whilst we do so, we might as well go through the plugs. So, Rhys, where can people find you on Twitter?
That's right, isn't it? So I'm on Twitter as Rhys Curtis14.
And of course, you can find Over the Bar on Twitter at Over the Bar FB. You can find us on YouTube as well, and on Twitch as well. We're not broadcasting on Twitch tonight, as there's a technical difficulty for some reason about that, but we will be streaming on there soon. So Over the Bar as well on YouTube and Twitch and all other social media platforms as well. The first question of the night: can Colchester continue postponing home matches? So, yeah, can Colchester carry on postponing home matches, Rhys?
From a moral point of view, no, they can't. But I'd be really interested to know, sort of from the EFL side, whether they'll allow any more postponements. Have they hit a limit now that these games have to be played? There wasn't Malden and Tiptree. I know it's not ideal, but Malden and Tiptree's only down the road from Colchester. That's not a far trek from where Colchester are now. That could be a potential plan B. Maybe play games there, even Portman Road if you have to. I'm sure there could be a deal sort of made there. So there are ways around it. I'm just not sure whether the EFL would approve any more postponements.
And a brilliant question right here. Thank you very much for this one, Ballum. A different type of question. If you two had to buy a football club in the Football League, and I'm going to throw this out there to everybody else in the chat as well, you can't pick your current team you support. Which club would you buy? And the one that is on sale. So it has to be a club that is on sale. Which club would you buy?
That's a great question, though. That is really, really good. Who would I go for? If we go for a general one first, we'll have a think about clubs I want to sale. If I go for a general one, I'd probably say, do I? Controversially, and I don't agree with how they got there, but I think the potential is there, is with MK Dons. I think the potential, you look at the stadium and how fantastic it is and the facilities that you could have inside, and you could really make that place something special. I don't agree with everything that happened with Wimbledon and how everything all came apart. It's ridiculous how that happened, to be honest. But I think in terms of potential and what it could do with a club, it's a blank canvas. You could really do something special there. That ground, I've been there a couple of times myself. It's absolutely phenomenal. It's a really, really good ground, and it's probably one of the few where teams moved and upgraded, to be honest, as well. If I had to go for one that's sale, I'm sorry, Andy Holt, but I'm coming for Accrington.
There's a website that I'm on at the moment called Burgess Corp. That is basically like an eBay for football clubs. So I'm on it at the moment. And there's a football club at the moment in the 6th tier, which would be the National League North, who is on sale for £800,000. It's not telling me which club it is, but there's another one in the 8th tier on sale for 200 million. And that is in the Isthmian League, another name that I've absolutely butchered right there. So imagine buying a club in non-league that is semi-professional for 200 million. Nobody could afford that. But a team that I would buy, first of all, I think the MK Dons would be a brilliant team to buy, because I think when you look at the facilities that they have, the stadium that they have as well, if you're a good owner for them and you go to the club, potentially rebrand them, like personally, and this may sound like an insult to MK Dons fans, but I reckon they should rebrand as Milton Keynes. That's always the joke right there. Nobody likes the MK Dons, but I reckon they'd be doing them a favour by maybe rebranding them as Milton Keynes, and maybe just kind of like making the most of their local area. Kind of like, I don't know what the word I'm trying to find is. I'm tired, but basically, yeah, like accepting where they are, accepting the area that they are in, like Milton Keynes, and just trying to become a community club. I reckon that'd be a brilliant kind of like thing to do if you were a potential owner. The two clubs that I'd potentially think about buying, one would be Torquay, a club. They're not local to me, but they're a couple of hours away from me. Last season, I remember them being in the National League player final. No, that was 2 seasons ago, I think, because they're in the Panorama South at the moment. And I remember Lucas Covalan scoring a goal for Torquay that almost got them to Wembley. Torquay, they're a club with a lot of history. They used to be in League Two. And I think that they're a club at the moment who are in dire straits. They could potentially go below the National League South. So I'd buy them, and I can't believe I'm calling them this, but they are sleeping giants. Nobody clip me right there. But I reckon they're a club with so much potential as well. And another club that I'd probably buy is Reading, a club. I don't have second clubs, as that isn't my thing. If I ever had to have a second club, then it would be Reading, because they were a club that I went to when I was younger because my grandparents support them. And again, they are a good community club. I don't like the Medeski Stadium, but they have such a loyal fan base as well. And I simply think that they're a club who deserve more at the moment, who shouldn't be in the predicament that they are in at the moment, and who do deserve saving. So I'm just going to read through some more of the comments. Are you guys feeling confident yet for Ipswich? Yeah, I think we answered that early on earlier on. See, I can barely talk in the moment. Earlier on in the show, I think we're feeling confident, aren't we, Rhys?
I am and I'm not. I still think defensively we lapse too much. We're not good enough at the back. We saw it with Hladky trying to play out the back tonight. Thankfully, he made what can be only described as a world-class save, but he gives the ball away 6 yards out, and realistically, we should have been punished for that. I think going forward, we're exceptional going forward. Our character, our belief is second to none. It's incredible. But a comment that has just picked my eye here from ATID, buzzing for League One. As an outside point of view, do you genuinely believe that you're actually I know you're in a relegation fight, but from a Plymouth point of view, do you believe that you're actually in trouble? Because I'm looking at sort of fixtures now. Bristol City at home, if you guys turn up, is a winnable game. Rotherham away, winnable. QPR, winnable. Then obviously you've got Leicester and Stoke, which, okay, they're going to be tough games. Yes, under Ian Foster, things haven't been anywhere near good enough. There's games where you're not even getting shots on target. It's been poor. But the likes of Morgan Whittaker, Ryan Hardy, these are players that single-handedly can win you games. So I know you're down in the slumps, but realistically, I think that the bottom three now are probably the three that are going down.
And I don't know who said this on Twitter, but I think it was some Ipswich fan, because there's a weird mini rivalry between the two clubs. But some fans said that Plymouth are a poor club who are going to go down. And personally, look, I don't see Plymouth week in, week out. I do occasionally go to a game, but they're a club who I quite like. They have some really good players in the likes of Morgan Whittaker, Ryan Hardy. And personally, I think the Championship would be better with Plymouth in it, simply because they are a very traditional club, and I like what they do with their youngsters. I like how they give younger players a go. And again, I'm just going to repeat what I just said, as I'm tired and my brain is on Mars at the moment. The Championship is better with them in it than with them not in it, if that makes sense. And at ATID, yes, we won't win another game this season under this bald scouse fraud. Really, is he that bad? Because I remember when he first joined the club and I was like, okay, he could be a pretty decent appointment right here. But I'm surprised that he's so disliked by Plymouth. But again, I don't follow Plymouth as closely as maybe I should. And Ryan Hardy missed 2 open goals today, which isn't good at all. Now, one final question before we do end with the milk advert. I'm just going to quickly read through the chat. I should really get these kind of like piled up before I do kind of like go through the questions. Anything you want to say, Rhys, whilst I'm reading through all of these?
Actually, tell you what, we'll have a quick look at impartial as we are. We'll have a look at that. It is still 2 on Watford. It's not going to happen, is it? Surely. I mean, it would be insane.
Oh, Watford winning.
Do a job. Oh, 2-1, mate, yeah.
2-1, wow. So, one final question right here, and this is in relation to what we were talking about earlier on in regards to teams going down from the Premier League. Now, of course, you can give us who you think will go down from the Premier League, and we'll read them next week on the show. One final question here tonight. Ben Brereton Diaz scores goals. Good to see Rochdale have another investor. There was actually a question up above. I clicked on the wrong question. One right here. What do we think about Ben Brereton Diaz at Sheffield United? And what do we make of his qualities? Now, I'll start off. I know that the Chile manager doesn't like him because he hasn't yet spoken the language. Ben Brereton is English, but he has a Chilean grandfather or uncle, somebody in his family that kind of like allows him to play for Chile. And ultimately, he's been criticised for not learning the language just yet. I think he's a very talented player, but I don't think his move to Spain was really the right thing for him, because he moved to Villarreal, didn't he? And I reckon it came at a point in his career where he really needed to stay in England, where he needed to stay in the Premier League, and where he just needed to stay in a place where he was comfortable in, because he hasn't settled well at all in Spain. He doesn't know the language. So Rhys, what do you make of Ben Brereton Diaz at Sheffield United? Because in my opinion, so far this season, he's struggled at a very poor team.
He has. It's hard not to make of this, to be honest. It is one that I do like, but if you're relying on purely Ben Brereton Diaz to come in and be sort of Superman and save the club from relegation, it's not going to happen. Let's be totally honest. He's not going to come in from out the dark and really transform the Sheffield United side. There's no doubt, having said that, there's quality there. And if it's a successful loan spell in the Championship, that's an incredible. Obviously, this is a lot of ifs, maybes, what ifs. But this would be an insane signing to make. It would be a real statement of intent in a really competitive division to bring in Ben Brereton Diaz. It would be an insane signing. But the only sort of caveat I have about it is the fact that this isn't a signing that I'd look at and go, right, okay, he's going to magically sort of swarm in and save us. But if you're looking at him more sort of long term and using the rest of this season as a sort of trial period, if you like, and then weighing up a move for him in the summer, then that's a deal I can really get behind.
Many apologies there. I think my internet is dying out. It's saying we've been on the air for too long. ATID talking about Ian Foster right here. He's absolutely appalling. The worst head coach we've ever had. Home Park was a fortress, and now we haven't won in 5 without scoring. And Ian Bradley says, "You've got us next week. Relax." ATID. Ballum, nice watch. Thank you for doing this live stream today. Yeah, thank you very much for joining us, Ballum. We always enjoy having you in the chat. I promise one day my name will properly be Benny on the little name tab that I have down below. I'll do that one day. And yeah, I think that is the end of the show. So we've already done the plugs. Thank you very much for joining us here tonight. A very long episode. If you are watching on demand, then of course ask your questions for next week's show down below. And I don't think this needs much of an introduction, but given our discussion about Accrington Stanley and Holt earlier on in the show, we are going to play this iconic advert to see the show out. Thank you very much to everybody who's joined us here tonight, and we'll see you next week.
Got any lemonade? If you want. Milk! Ugh! It's what Ian Rush drinks. Ian Rush? Yeah, and he said if I didn't drink lots of milk, when I grow up, I'm going to be good enough to play for Accrington Stanley. Accrington Stanley? Who are they? Exactly. Nah, get off. Give me